I don't even know how to start this. I guess I just need to get it all out before I lose my mind. My wife, Stephanie, and I have been married for 8 years. We met in college, got married right after graduation, and built what I thought was a solid, happy life together. I never imagined I'd be the guy writing one of these posts, but here I am, sitting in my car, shaking with a mix of rage, confusion, and disbelief, wondering if my marriage has been a joke this entire time. Things between us had been strange for months, though I kept convincing myself I was imagining it. Stephanie had always been affectionate, the type to hug me from behind while I made coffee or squeeze my hand under the table during dinner. But lately, she had become distant, distracted. At first, I chalked it up to stress. She's in marketing and had been working on a big campaign that was taking up a lot of her time. I figured she was just overwhelmed. But then there were the small, nagging things. She started going out more, claiming she needed errands that never seemed to result in anything tangible. I'd ask her what she bought, and she'd shrug, say, "Oh, just some small things," but never actually show me. She started dressing differently, too more effort for casual outings, wearing perfume even when she was supposedly just going grocery shopping. Then came the excuses. Late nights at the office. Sudden plans with coworkers I had never heard of. Random girls' nights that always seemed to pop up at the last minute, but somehow never involved any of the friends she used to mention. It was like I was watching my wife slowly turn into someone else, someone who barely acknowledged me anymore. And then there was the bedroom. Or rather, the lack of it. Stephanie had always had a high sex drive, but somewhere in the last 6 months, that changed. Every attempt I made was met with an excuse. She was tired, she had a headache, she wasn't in the mood. When we did have sex, it felt forced, like she was going through the motions just to keep me from asking questions. There was no passion, no connection. I could feel her slipping away, but every time I tried to talk about it, she shut me down. She accused me of overthinking things, of being paranoid, of making a problem where there wasn't one. And I wanted to believe her. I wanted so badly to believe that I was just imagining things, that my wife, the woman I had loved for nearly a decade, wasn't hiding something from me. But I couldn't ignore the signs, not anymore. The final straw came last Saturday. Stephanie told me she was going shopping. She kissed me goodbye, grabbed her purse, and left in a hurry, almost as if she couldn't wait to get out of the house. Something about the way she practically sprinted out the door put a pit in my stomach. I tried to shake it off, told myself I was just being ridiculous, but the feeling wouldn't go away. An hour later, I decided to go out myself, just to clear my head. I got in my car, drove aimlessly for a bit, and then, without really thinking about it, found myself heading toward our best friend's house. That's when I saw it. Her car. Stephanie's car was parked right outside Jake and Sarah's house. Now, when I say best friend, I mean ours. Both of ours. Jake and Sarah have been in our lives since college. We vacationed together, spent holidays together, had game nights, dinners, everything. If there were 2 people I would have sworn on my life we could trust, it was them. I pulled over a few houses down, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly I thought I might snap it in half. Maybe she was just visiting Sarah, I told myself. Maybe they had planned something and I just forgot. But as I sat there, trying to convince myself that there was an innocent explanation, I saw her. Stephanie, my wife, standing in front of their house, laughing at something Jake said. Jake, not Sarah. Jake was standing far too close to her. His hand brushed her arm in a way that wasn't friendly. He was grinning at her the way I used to. And the worst part? She wasn't pulling away. She was leaning into it. She was looking up at him like he was the most interesting man on the planet. I watched as they walked up to his front door together. He unlocked it, held it open for her, and without a single hesitation, she stepped inside. The door closed, and I sat there, staring at the house, my heart hammering in my chest, knowing deep down I had just watched my wife walk into another man's arms. I should have gotten out of the car. I should have stormed up to that door and demanded answers. But I didn't. I just sat there, frozen in place, as the reality of what was happening started to sink in. I don't know how long I stayed there. Maybe 10 minutes. Maybe an hour. Time felt meaningless. Eventually, I drove away. I couldn't bring myself to stay parked there, waiting to see what I already knew was happening behind the closed door. And now I'm here, writing this, trying to make sense of it. I don't know what to do next. I don't know how to process this. All I know is that my wife was supposed to be shopping, and instead, she was with him. I barely remember the drive home. My mind was a chaotic mess, playing and replaying the image of Stephanie stepping inside Jake's house like she belonged there. The way she had smiled at him, how close they had stood, the casual ease of it all. It wasn't hesitation, it wasn't a mistake. This wasn't the first time. That realization hit me like a hammer to the chest, making it hard to breathe. If this had been the first time she was sneaking off to be with him, she would have looked nervous, maybe glanced over her shoulder or hesitated before stepping inside. But she hadn't. She had walked in like she had done it a dozen times before, like this was just part of their routine. That thought alone made my grip tighten on the steering wheel, my knuckles going white as I fought the urge to turn the car around and demand answers right then and there. But I knew better. I had nothing except suspicion, and if there was one thing I knew about Stephanie, it was that she could lie so effortlessly, so convincingly, that I'd end up doubting myself if I confronted her without solid proof. When I finally pulled into our driveway, I just sat there for a moment, staring at the front door. It was surreal, sitting in the same place where I had always felt safe, always felt at home, knowing that everything had changed in a single afternoon. I had spent years believing I had a good marriage, trusting that the woman inside that house was faithful, that she loved me the same way I loved her. But now, all I could see was a stranger. I knew I couldn't go inside like nothing had happened, but I also couldn't let her know that I was onto her. I needed to be smart, needed to gather enough evidence so that when I confronted her, there would be no way for her to twist the truth, no way for her to gaslight me into believing I was crazy. So I sat there in silence, taking deep, measured breaths, forcing myself to think logically instead of letting the anger take control. Stephanie didn't come home until nearly 4 hours later. For hours, she was supposed to be shopping, but she had spent all that time with Jake, doing God knows what behind closed doors. When she walked through the door, she acted as if nothing had happened, tossing her purse onto the counter and flashing me a tired smile. "You won't believe how crazy it was out there," she said, shaking her head as she kicked off her shoes. The mall was packed. I barely found anything. She even held up a small shopping bag, probably something she picked up last minute to sell the story. I forced a chuckle, playing along, nodding like I believed her. "Yeah," I asked, keeping my voice even. "What did you get?" She pulled out a single scented candle, holding it up as if that explained where she had been all day. "A fucking candle." I nodded again, swallowing down the rage that threatened to surface. "Nice," I said, keeping my tone casual. "Guess you had a long day." She stretched her arms above her head, letting out an exaggerated sigh. "So exhausting," she murmured. "I just want to take a hot bath and relax." And with that, she disappeared into the bathroom, completely oblivious to the fact that I knew exactly where she had been, who she had been with. The lies rolled off her tongue so smoothly that it made my stomach turn. How long had she been lying to me like this? How many nights had she come home from his house and kissed me like nothing was wrong? The thought made my skin crawl, made the walls of our home feel suffocating. I knew I had to find out more. That night, while she slept soundly beside me, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. If she had been with Jake today, then this wasn't some random, impulsive mistake. This was something deeper, something ongoing. I needed to know how long this had been going on, needed to know just how deep the betrayal ran. And so, as quietly as possible, I slid out of bed and grabbed her phone. Normally, she left it charging on her nightstand, but lately, she had been keeping it close, taking it into the bathroom with her, slipping it into her purse whenever she left the room. Another red flag I had ignored for too long. Tonight, though, she had been careless, leaving it face down on the dresser. My hands were shaking as I picked it up, my heart hammering against my ribs. I tried her passcode, our anniversary. Wrong. I tried her birthday. Wrong again. My stomach twisted. She had changed it. That alone told me everything I needed to know. Stephanie had never been secretive with her phone before. In fact, she used to hand it to me all the time to check directions, to answer texts while she was driving. But now she had locked me out. I placed it back exactly as I had found it, slipping back into bed, my mind spinning with possibilities. If she was hiding her phone from me, then that meant whatever was inside it was worse than I had imagined. The next day, while she was in the shower, I decided to take a different approach. I grabbed my laptop and logged into our shared phone account. We were on the same plan, meaning I could see all incoming and outgoing calls and texts, just not the content of them. My hands clenched into fists as I scrolled through the logs. There it was, Jake's number, over and over again. Long phone calls late at night when she had told me she was too tired to talk. Texts back and forth all day, every day, far more than she texted me. The logs went back months. Months. That was when I felt something inside me break. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't some drunken, one-time slip-up. This was deliberate. Repeated. Thought out. She had been lying to my face for months, sneaking off to be with him while I sat at home like an idiot, completely unaware. The worst part was, Jake had been my friend too. We had known each other for years. I had trusted him. I had let him into my home, shared holidays with him, toasted drinks over backyard barbecues, all while he was screwing my wife behind my back. I closed the laptop and leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. The betrayal felt suffocating, like a heavy weight pressing down on my chest. My wife and my best friend. It was almost cliché, something out of a bad movie, but this was my life. My reality. And now that I had proof, I had to decide what to do with it. I could confront her right away, throw the evidence in her face, and watch her scramble for excuses, but something in me hesitated. She would deny it, try to twist it, make herself the victim. No, I needed more. I needed something she couldn't talk her way out of. So I made a decision. I was going to catch them in the act. I spent the next few days barely holding myself together, acting like nothing had changed while inside, I was drowning in anger and disbelief. Every time Stephanie smiled at me, every time she kissed me goodbye, every time she said, "I love you," it felt like I was being poisoned. I had to fight the urge to scream, to demand she tell me the truth, to grab her phone and force her to show me everything. But I knew that if I confronted her now, she would find a way to twist the narrative, to gaslight me into thinking I was paranoid, that I was making something out of nothing. So I played the long game, waiting, watching, pretending everything was normal while inside, I was preparing for war. I kept checking our phone records, watching as the calls and texts between her and Jake continued nonstop. She wasn't even trying to hide it anymore, not from him, anyway. But from me? From me, she played the devoted wife perfectly. Every night, she would curl up next to me in bed as if she hadn't just spent hours talking to another man. I could see it now, the way she would turn away from me, clutching her phone tightly in her hand, her thumbs moving quickly over the screen before she would tuck it under her pillow like a teenager hiding something from her parents. It made me sick. Then came the moment I had been waiting for. Friday afternoon, Stephanie told me she had a work meeting that would run late, and she might just grab dinner with a few coworkers after. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral, even as my stomach twisted with the truth. There was no work meeting. There were no coworkers. She was going to him. The moment she left, I was out the door, following at a safe distance, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly I thought I might snap it in half. My heart pounded as I trailed her through town, down streets I knew too well, past places we had been together, memories tainted now by the weight of her betrayal. She didn't go to a restaurant. She didn't go to her office. She went straight to Jake's house. I parked a block away, my entire body vibrating with rage as I watched her get out of her car, smooth down her dress, check her reflection in the window, and then knock on his door. He opened it almost instantly, like he had been waiting for her, and the moment she stepped inside, I knew there was no turning back. I had my proof. But proof wasn't enough. I needed to see it with my own eyes. I got out of the car and walked toward the house, my heartbeat roaring in my ears. Every step felt heavy, like I was moving through quicksand, like my body was trying to stop me from seeing what I already knew. But I couldn't stop now. I needed the truth. Needed to look them both in the face and see their reaction when they realized their secret wasn't a secret anymore. The blinds in the living room were partially open, and as I got closer, I could see them. Stephanie was sitting on the couch, laughing at something Jake had said, holding a glass of wine in her hand, looking more relaxed than she had in months. She looked happy. Not the tired, distant woman she had become around me, but the woman I used to know. The realization that he was the one making her happy, that he was the one getting the smiles and the laughter that used to belong to me, made my blood boil. Then, as if to drive the knife in deeper, he reached for her, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek in a way that was so intimate, so familiar, that I nearly saw red. And Stephanie? She leaned into it. She closed her eyes, sighing softly, letting him touch her like she belonged to him. I didn't need to see anything more. I had seen enough. I didn't bother knocking. I slammed my fist against the door so hard it rattled on its hinges. Silence. Then hurried footsteps, muffled voices, and a few seconds later, Jake opened the door, his face draining of color the moment he saw me. "Oh, shit," he muttered, his hand tightening on the doorknob as if debating whether to slam it shut. But it was too late. I was already stepping inside. Stephanie was standing now, her face pale, eyes wide with shock. "W, what are you doing here?" she stammered, clutching her wine glass like it was the only thing keeping her upright. I let out a hollow laugh, shaking my head. "Really, Stephanie? That's what you're going with?" I turned to Jake, my so-called best friend, who looked like he wanted to disappear. "And you don't even have the balls to look me in the eye, do you?" He swallowed hard, rubbing the back of his neck. "Man, listen, shut the fuck up." I snapped, my voice low and dangerous, the kind of voice I barely recognized as my own. "I don't want to hear a single goddamn word from you." I turned back to Stephanie, and for a moment, we just stared at each other, the weight of everything hanging between us. "How long?" I asked, my voice shaking despite my best effort to keep it steady. She licked her lips, glancing at Jake like he could somehow save her, but I wasn't having it. "Don't look at him," I snapped. "Look at me." Her throat bobbed as she swallowed, her fingers tightening around the wine glass. It just happened," she whispered. I laughed again, this time louder, harsher. "Just happened? That's funny, because I've been looking at our phone records, Stephanie. I've been watching you for weeks. It didn't just happen. It's been happening. Over and over again. So don't fucking lie to me." Her eyes filled with tears, and I could see it now, the wheels turning in her head, trying to figure out the right thing to say, the way to spin this so that she could somehow still come out as the victim. "I never meant to hurt you," she finally said, her voice small. I was unhappy, and I didn't know how to tell you." I scoffed. "So instead of talking to me, you fucked my best friend?" She flinched, her tears spilling over, but I felt nothing. No sympathy, no sadness, just a deep, seething rage. Jake cleared his throat, taking a small step forward like he actually had the nerve to speak. "Look, man, I know this is fucked up, but I told you to shut the fuck up." I cut him off, my voice so sharp that he immediately took a step back. "You don't get to talk. You don't get to make excuses. You don't get to look me in the face after stabbing me in the back." Stephanie took a shaky breath. "What happens now?" I stared at her for a long moment, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on me. The years together, the trust, the love I thought we had. It was all gone, shattered beyond repair. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm, to keep my voice even. Now you pack your shit and get the fuck out of my house." Her face crumbled. "Please, can we just talk about this?" I shook my head. "No, Stephanie. We're done." I turned on my heel and walked out, not looking back, not giving her the satisfaction of seeing if I was breaking. Because I wasn't. Not anymore. I don't remember much about the drive home except for the feeling in my chest, like my heart had been hollowed out and replaced with something cold and heavy. I kept gripping the steering wheel tighter, trying to keep my hands from shaking, trying to keep myself from thinking too much. But how do you stop thinking when your entire life has just collapsed? When the person you trusted most, the person you built a future with, turns out to be nothing more than a liar who was smiling in your face while fucking your best friend behind your back? It didn't feel real. It felt like some horrible, twisted nightmare that I should have woken up from. But there I was, parked in my own driveway, staring at a house that suddenly felt foreign to me, a place I had shared with her, filled with our memories, now nothing more than a crime scene. I sat there for a long time, just breathing, trying to force myself to feel something other than rage. But the anger was all-consuming. The betrayal, the humiliation, the fact that I had been the last to know, it all made my skin crawl. I had spent weeks doubting myself, wondering if I was just being paranoid, questioning if I was overreacting, while all along, she had been sneaking around with Jake, probably laughing at how oblivious I was. I could see it now, the way she would come home and kiss me like nothing had happened, the way she would tell me she was tired after work, the way she would roll over in bed while texting him, making excuses for why she wasn't in the mood. And the worst part? I had trusted her. I had trusted both of them. I don't know how long I sat there, but eventually, I forced myself to get out of the car and go inside. The second I stepped through the door, the silence hit me. It was the same house I had left that morning, but something was different now. The air felt heavier, like the walls were holding in secrets, whispering back all the lies that had been spoken under this roof. Everything in here reminded me of her. Her jacket still hanging on the coat rack, Her perfume lingering in the air, the framed pictures on the mantle of vacations, of anniversaries, of a life that I had thought was real. My stomach turned. I couldn't stand to look at any of it. I walked straight to the bedroom, feeling numb, feeling empty. The bed was neatly made, like always, but now all I could think about was how many times she had laid here, texting him, thinking about him, while I was lying next to her, completely clueless. I opened the closet, staring at her side, the clothes, the neatly arranged shoes, the dresses she had probably worn for him, not me. A sick part of me wanted to rip everything off the hangers, to throw it all into the street, to burn it until there was nothing left. But I didn't. Not yet. I needed to be smart. I grabbed a duffel bag and started shoving my things inside. I didn't know where I was going, but I couldn't stay here. Not tonight. Not in this bed. Not in this house that now felt like a prison. As I zipped up the bag, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I already knew who it was before I even looked. Stephanie. I stared at the screen for a long moment, watching as her name flashed over and over again. My thumb hovered over the decline button, but at the last second, I picked up. What? My voice was cold, detached, a voice I barely recognized as my own. Please, just let me explain, she begged, her voice thick with desperation. There's nothing to explain, I said flatly. I caught you. I saw you. You lied to me, over and over again. So don't waste your breath. I know, she sniffled, and I could hear the tears in her voice, but I felt nothing. I made a mistake, okay? I never wanted to hurt you. I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. A mistake. I repeated. A mistake is forgetting to take out the trash. A mistake is sending a text to the wrong person. You didn't make a mistake, Stephanie. You made a choice. Over and over again. You chose to lie. You chose to sneak around. You chose him. She went silent, and for a moment, all I could hear was her breathing. Then, softly, she whispered, I still love you. Something inside me snapped. I clenched my jaw, gripping the phone so tightly I thought it might break. Don't, I said through gritted teeth. Don't you dare say that to me. You don't get to cheat on me and then tell me you love me. You don't get to lie to my face for months and then act like you give a damn about my feelings. You lost that right the second you walked into his house. But I hope it was worth it, I cut her off, my voice deadly calm. Because you and we're done. I hung up before she could say another word, before she could twist the knife any deeper. My entire body was shaking, but I refused to break. I refused to let her tears manipulate me, to let her guilt drag me back into the mess she created. I grabbed my bag and walked out the door, locking it behind me, leaving behind the woman I had once thought was my forever. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I wasn't coming back. I didn't know where I was driving. I just knew I had to get away. The house, the memories, the smell of her perfume lingering in every room, it was suffocating, poisoning me from the inside out. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles had turned white. My jaw clenched so hard it felt like my teeth might crack. The rage inside me wasn't just burning. It was consuming me, eating away at whatever rational thought I had left. I could still hear her voice echoing in my head. I still love you. What a joke. Love? Love isn't sneaking around with another man. Love isn't looking your husband in the eyes and lying to him, night after night, telling him you're tired when you've just spent hours with someone else. Love isn't letting your husband question his own sanity, making him feel paranoid for noticing the signs, for trusting his gut. She hadn't just cheated. She had gaslighted me, made me doubt myself, made me feel crazy for even suspecting something was wrong. And now that she had been caught, now that there was no more hiding, suddenly she loved me again? I wanted to scream. I wanted to turn the car around, storm back into that house, and demand to know why. Why him? Why now? How long had this been going on? But I already knew that none of her answers would be good enough. No excuse could undo the months of deceit, the way she had stolen my security, my trust, my marriage. And Jake, fucking Jake. My so-called best friend. The guy I had trusted with everything. I had spent years thinking of him as a brother, someone I would have taken a bullet for. I had let him into my home, had dinners with him, laughed with him, trusted him. And the entire time, he was looking me in the eye while fucking my wife behind my back. I pulled into a gas station, my hands trembling as I parked. I couldn't keep driving aimlessly, burning through fuel and adrenaline. I needed a second to breathe, to process, to figure out what the hell I was going to do next. I sat there for a while, staring blankly at the dashboard, my pulse hammering in my ears. My phone buzzed beside me. I didn't want to look. I already knew it was her. But something in me, a twisted, masochistic part, needed to see what she was saying. I grabbed my phone and, sure enough, there it was. Stephanie for missed calls. A text popped up right after, as if she knew I had just looked. Please answer me. Just talk to me. Please. I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. Now she wanted to talk? Where was this desperation when I was lying in bed beside her, wondering why she had been so cold? Where was this urgency when I was asking if something was wrong, begging her to be honest with me? I shoved the phone back onto the passenger seat, refusing to reply. She didn't deserve my words. A knock on my window made me jolt, my head snapping toward the sound. My stomach clenched when I saw who it was. Sarah, Jake's wife. Her eyes were red, swollen, and I could see the tear stains on her cheeks even in the dim lighting of the gas station. She looked as wrecked as I felt. I rolled down the window, my throat suddenly dry. Hey, she croaked, her voice barely above a whisper. Hey, I muttered back, rubbing a hand down my face. How did you? I called you, she interrupted, glancing at my phone. I figured if you weren't home, you'd be somewhere. And I don't know. I just had to find you. I sighed, unlocking the passenger door. Get in. She slid into the seat, pulling her knees up to her chest, wrapping her arms around them like she was trying to make herself as small as possible. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. We just sat there, two people drowning in the same betrayal, staring at the dashboard as if it held the answers to the million questions spinning in our heads. You saw them, didn't you? She finally whispered, her voice cracking. I let out a slow breath, gripping the steering wheel again. Yeah, I said, my voice hollow. I saw everything. A shudder ran through her body, and she wiped at her face with her sleeve. I keep trying to figure out when it started. If it was months ago, or years, or if they've been sneaking around behind our backs since the beginning. Her voice was thick with emotion, and I could hear the pain behind every word. I keep thinking about all the times I left them alone, all the times Jake told me he was helping Stephanie with something. I was so fucking stupid. I shook my head. You weren't stupid. We weren't stupid. We trusted them. That's not stupidity. That's what people in relationships are supposed to do. She let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head. And look where that got us. Silence settled over us again, heavy and suffocating. I wanted to say something to make it better, but there was nothing to say. Nothing could undo what had already been done. After a while, Sarah exhaled shakily and turned to me, her eyes glistening with fresh tears. What are you going to do? I clenched my jaw, staring out at the dark road ahead. Divorce her, I said without hesitation. She doesn't get to lie to me for months and then cry about it when she gets caught. She made her choice. Now she has to live with it. Sarah swallowed hard, nodding. Yeah, she whispered. Yeah, I guess that's the only thing to do. A long pause stretched between us before she spoke again, her voice softer this time. It's not fair, she murmured. We didn't deserve this. No, I agreed, my throat tight. We didn't. I didn't know what was going to happen next. I didn't know if Stephanie was still at home, waiting for me, or if she had already packed a bag and run back to Jake. I didn't know if Jake was sitting in his house right now, thinking of excuses, or if he was laughing to himself, relieved that the truth was finally out. And honestly, I didn't care. I was done. Done trying to figure them out. Done giving a damn about what their next move was. They had already taken enough from me, my trust, my peace of mind, my marriage. They weren't going to take my dignity, too. I turned to Sarah, seeing my own pain mirrored in her expression. You want to grab a drink? I asked, my voice rough. She blinked in surprise, then let out a weak laugh. Yeah, she said, exhaling shakily. Yeah, I think I really fucking need one. And with that, I put the car in drive, leaving behind the wreckage of the life I had once known, and for the first time since this nightmare started, I felt like I was finally taking control of my own story. The bar was quiet, the kind of place where people went to be left alone, where the dim lighting and low music made it easy to hide in your own thoughts. It was exactly what I needed. Sarah and I slid into a booth near the back, both of us too drained to say much at first. The bartender came over, and without hesitation, I ordered a double whiskey. Sarah hesitated for a second before ordering the same. We sat there in silence as the drinks were poured, both of us staring at the dark liquid like it held some kind of answer, some kind of clarity we were both desperate for. I took the first sip, letting the burn settle in my throat, letting the heat distract me from the cold, gnawing emptiness inside my chest. Sarah finally spoke, her voice quieter than usual. I still can't believe this is real. Her fingers traced the rim of her glass, her eyes unfocused, lost in thought. One day, I thought I had a normal life. Now, I don't even know what my life is anymore. I nodded slowly, staring at the ice swirling in my drink. Yeah, it's like everything was a lie. Everything I thought I knew about her, about us, none of it was real. I exhaled sharply, shaking my head. And the worst part? I feel like an idiot for not seeing it sooner. Sarah let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head. You're not an idiot. If you are, then so am I. We trusted them. That's what we were supposed to do. She took a deep breath, her grip tightening around her glass. You know, I keep replaying every little thing in my head. Every time Jake was working late, or when he would be on his phone and say it was just work stuff. I keep thinking about all those times he smiled at me, kissed me, told me he loved me, while he was fucking my best friend. Her voice cracked on the last words, and she took a deep sip of her whiskey, like she was trying to drown the pain before it could surface. I understood that feeling all too well. The anger, the humiliation, the sheer disbelief that the people we had loved, had chosen to build a life with, could betray us so easily. Stephanie tried to call me again, I muttered, rolling the glass between my hands. She texted too. Said she just wants to talk. Like there's anything left to fucking say. Sarah scoffed, shaking her head. They always do that. They lie, they cheat, and then the moment they realize they've been caught, suddenly they want to talk. She took another sip, then glanced at me, her expression unreadable. Do you think she's actually sorry? I thought about it for a moment, but the answer came quicker than I expected. No, I said, my voice steady. I think she's sorry she got caught. I think she's sorry her little secret isn't a secret anymore. But actually sorry? No. If she really loved me, if she really gave a damn about me, she wouldn't have done this in the first place. She wouldn't have spent months lying to my face, sneaking around with him. I shook my head, my grip tightening around the glass. She's not sorry for what she did. She's just sorry she has to deal with the consequences. Sarah nodded slowly, staring at a spot on the table like she was deep in thought. Yeah, I think that's what hurts the most. Knowing that they weren't thinking about us at all. They weren't thinking about how this would destroy us, about how it would change us. They just did it. Because they wanted to. Because they could. She exhaled sharply, shaking her head. And now we're the ones left picking up the pieces while they act like they still deserve a seat at the table. I let out a humorless chuckle, leaning back against the booth. Not my table. Not anymore. We sat there for a while, drinking in silence, both of us lost in the wreckage of our marriages, in the realization that everything we thought we knew had been shattered beyond repair. But after a few drinks, something changed. The weight in my chest didn't feel as suffocating. The rage wasn't burning quite as hot. It was still there, lingering beneath the surface, but it wasn't consuming me the way it had been. Maybe it was the alcohol. Maybe it was the fact that, for the first time since discovering the truth, I wasn't alone in this. Sarah understood in a way no one else could. She had been betrayed by the same people, had been blindsided in the same way. And sitting across from her, I realized something. I wasn't the only one who had lost everything today. She looked up at me then, her blue eyes glassy, her lips pressed together in a tight line. So what now? She asked quietly. I exhaled, running a hand through my hair. I don't know, I admitted. But I do know I'm not going back. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. Sarah nodded, understanding. Me either. She hesitated for a second, then took another sip of her drink before meeting my eyes. You want to get a hotel? Just for the night? I mean, not, she shook her head, laughing softly. Not like that. Just, neither of us should be alone right now. I studied her for a moment, then nodded. Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. We left the bar without another word, the weight of the night still pressing down on us. But there was something different now. It wasn't just pain. It wasn't just anger. It was clarity. For the first time since my world had been flipped upside down, I felt like I knew exactly what I had to do. I was going to divorce Stephanie. I was going to cut her out of my life like the cancer she had become. And I was going to move the fuck on. As we pulled into the hotel parking lot, Sarah let out a breath, her shoulders relaxing just a little. You know, she murmured, staring out the window, I always thought I knew how my life would go. I thought I had it all figured out. Turns out, I didn't know shit. I smirked slightly, shaking my head. Yeah, welcome to the club. She turned to me then, offering a small, tired smile. At least we're in this mess together. I nodded, finally feeling something close to peace. Yeah, I said. We are. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel alone. And that was a damn good start.